Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Before we begin, the Grandel Wrestling Podcast would like to salute our partners who make all this possible. First, the St. Louis Kings of the Calzone, sauce on the side in the Grove. You can't go wrong with the Pancho Villa or one of their dessert calzones. There is an art to this dish, and there is one master artist of the calzone, sauce on the side. Dine in, carry out, or delivery. We'd also like to welcome the newest member of our family, the Southwest Diner. Serving up diner staples and foods of the American Southwest, Southwest Diner has been a favorite of locals and visitors alike since 2012. If you're into the classics, you can't go wrong with the biscuits and homemade sausage gravy. You like spice? Dig into Jonathan's famous fiery scramble. They also do an excellent smash burger. You gotta check it out. The crispy edges are amazing. Now offering delivery, curbside pickup, and a brand spanking new patio. There are plenty of safe and enjoyable ways to get your Southwest Diner fix. And now, on with the show. Hey wrestling fans, and welcome back to the Grandel Wrestling Podcast. We have a big guest this week, one of the stars of Ring of Honor and a former territory star himself, I guess you could say, the Mile High Magnum, Dak Draper. Dak, welcome in.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I learned a lot about you in brushing up for this episode, and I'm even more excited than I was before. A D2 wrestler in college and scouted by the one and only Jerry Briscoe. Big story there. How did this come about in your life?
So it's really funny. I didn't see Jerry Briscoe when he scouted me. I only heard him because this is the national tournament, my senior year. The big goal is to become an All-American. And
this is in Nebraska, right?
Yes. And I lost the match that would have made me an All-American by 1 point in the last second. So I'm crushed. 12 years of amateur wrestling, ever since I'm a little kid, all culminates in this big letdown. And so I'm sitting in the bleachers and I feel like a balloon that's just had all the air let out of it. And I've got a towel over my head. And I hear somebody go, hey, can that kid talk? And my coach is like, what? He goes, does he have a personality? Does he talk a lot? And my coach is like, oh yeah, he talks too much. And that was it. And then I got a Facebook message from Jerry Briscoe 2 days later. And he was like, hey, if you want to try out for WWE, you can. If not, no big deal. And like, that was it. And so I responded wait, is this a real thing? And I knew the name Jerry Briscoe because I got into amateur wrestling as a kid because my mom hated that I watched pro wrestling. And so we had this agreement where I had to go to kids wrestling practice if I was going to watch Monday Night Raw. And so I had to go to kids wrestling practice. I loved the wrestling part. I loved wrestling people, but I hated warming up and I hated the conditioning. So I hated all the jogging and all that stuff. And so it was kind of this little barter system that I had with my mom. So I knew who Jerry Briscoe was, and I kind of assumed it was just a fake Facebook account. It didn't even have a profile picture. And he responded, and it turned out to be legit. And they flew me down to Tampa for a tryout, and I did horribly.
And back then, this was Florida Championship Wrestling was the developmental.
This was FCW. Dr. Tom was still a coach, and I came down there. Everything I did was bad. I was probably little heavy. I probably weighed about 260. I don't even think I had shaved. I didn't trim my beard or anything. I looked like a dumb college kid. And the only thing I did well was my promo. Big surprise. And that's what ended up getting me another opportunity a year later with WWE. But they told me that then wasn't the time. But I lived in Nebraska at the time, and I went to college up in Nebraska. And so I didn't know there was no independent wrestling up there. I had no way of getting into wrestling. And I just kind of thought well, you want to become a wrestler, you get hired to go to the WCW power plant. Right. And so I had one MMA fight at that point because I loved being in front of a crowd. I always loved showmanship. And so the only way I knew to be in front of a crowd coming from amateur wrestling was mixed martial arts. So I was 1-0 in MMA, accomplished everything I needed to accomplish, obviously, hung the gloves up for good. But I was training for MMA really hard, and that was going to be my trajectory. And as soon as I got that taste of pro wrestling, I remember at the tryout, Norman Smiley taught a headlock takeover, And then he taught us the headlock takeover, and the guy who just got taken over does a head scissor to get out of it, to counter it. And I was hooked from there. I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
And so after that, even though they told me that I wasn't going to get signed by WWE, I was like, I still want to do this. By the end of the week, I'd moved to Denver to try and find training. This first school that I went to, the first day was, and it's a school that Briscoe told me to go to seek out. The first day, I'm like, so how much does it cost a month to go here? And the guy's like, oh, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And I'm like, okay. And I'd kind of read online about people being carny in wrestling and stuff. And I thought he was going to try and like screw me out of a bunch of money. But he had us break down the ring.
Now, who is he?
I don't remember the guy's name.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I thought you were just protecting the innocent.
Well, this is how short our interaction was. The guy had us all break down the ring, and he brings everybody together, and he goes, guys, I'm shutting the school down. So my first day, they closed the school. And I was like, oh, cool, awesome. And so I was crashing on a friend's couch in Denver at the time. My mom lived an hour south in Colorado Springs, so I moved down there, and I was like, I guess I got to try and find a job and find a way to get wrestling training, and just happened to see a flyer for a Pat Tanaka seminar. And I went to the Pat Tanaka seminar, and he pulled me aside halfway through, and he's like, you're with me now.
Man.
And I was with Pat, and he trained me for a year, and then I ended up getting re-signed.
That's an amazing story. And I think that one of the things I'm so excited to talk to you about today is, your starring role in so many companies around here as well. But the beginning, man, like that's one of the most interesting beginnings I've heard on this show.
People, when I tell them that story, they're like, wow, you really wanted to be a wrestler. Like you moved a lot for this, and you really had to seek out training when it was hard, which is hilarious because I feel like a lot of people that don't know me don't think I really wanted to be a wrestler, just think that I like wanted to do it because of like happenstance or because I was an amateur wrestler. But when I take inventory of all the times I've had to seek out opportunities to get better, it's like, wow, I have really chased people down to get trained in wrestling a lot.
So the WWE Performance Center opened in 2013 in Orlando, and I know we're a little bit before that time. Did you catch wind of that opening, and did you specifically want to be a part of that?
So I found out it was opening, I was already under contract there. So I got signed in 2012. I was working at a high school as a security guard. I hated it so much because I was 22 years old policing 18-year-olds. And so I got no respect I just got made fun of by the kids. No one listened to me. And I just got in an argument with some like 17-year-old girl about walking in the hallways. And I hated my life so much. And I had a voicemail when I looked at my phone, and they had just changed over talent relations people at WWE, and they were offering me a new tryout because Jerry Briscoe told them, hey, this guy tried out last year, and or not even last year, it was 7 months before. He tried out 7 months ago, and I think he might have had something, but just the time wasn't right. And so I saw that voicemail, and they're like, we want to bring you in for another tryout. And it was the same FCW building. The only difference was Bill DeMott was the head coach then. And my only interaction with Bill DeMott before that was at the first tryout. I was really nervous to like look around and look at people. So I was just buried in my phone, which I didn't realize was so bad to do. And my only interaction with Bill, who I was terrified of because I had seen him on Tough Enough. So also I'm looking at my phone because I just don't want Bill to like acknowledge me because I was scared he was going to yell at me because all I knew of him was what I had seen on Tough Enough. And so he goes, oh, what are you typing? Dear Diary, makes me sick, and just storms off. And I was like, oh no, this guy hates me. So I get on the flight to go to my next tryout. I land, and I think the Observer had posted, Dr. Tom has been fired. Bill DeMott's the new head trainer. And I'm like, I'm going to spend a week at this tryout, and Bill DeMott's just going to hate me this whole week. And thank God they didn't even remember who I was, because in those 7 months in between the first and the second tryout, I changed my body, changed my look. I looked and acted like a different person because I knew what was necessary for pro wrestling at that point. I wasn't a complete moron at that point. And so that was at the FCW building. I got hired. I reported in September of 2012, and we were there for almost a year until we moved to the Performance Center. But that time before the Performance Center was like, it was almost something where we didn't think that it was actually going to happen. Like they talked about it and they're like, we just signed a lease on the building, or we signed a contract to have all this work done on the building. And people are like, oh, that's cool. but there were always kind of rumblings among like the guys that were in, it was called NXT, but we were still in the FCW building. It was FCW, but the name was just different.
Right.
There were kind of rumblings among the guys like, yeah, this isn't really going to happen, until we started moving stuff into Orlando. Like they started to be like, hey, you guys need to be up in Orlando this day. We saw the actual facility. And then you feel like you're in an NFL facility walking around because you see the gym, the lounge, like all this stuff. It's huge. And so it was something that we thought was going to be like too good to be true until it happened.
Yeah.
And there were great things and there were drawbacks to that too. There were things I loved about FCW. I loved how it wasn't that sterile environment, how it was like, there was a lot, it felt a lot less like a factory. And so I thought that you kind of got more, almost more organic moments. And that's almost like a camaraderie thing where I feel like if you're in there sweating with a bunch of guys in a warehouse, like FCW was a warehouse. If you're in there sweating with a bunch of guys and it's hot in the summer and well, it's never cold in Florida. So it's just hot in the summer, not cold in the winter. I feel like you kind of have those good memories and it kind of helps you build like not character, but build a character because you guys are always kind of BSing and stuff like that. The Performance Center was a lot more like a factory and business like, and which I think is cool because you had everything under one roof. You had a strength coach. My body started to feel so much better because we had this big training room and I was actually getting athletic training. But the drawback is it felt a lot more like going to work. You know, you have different boxes you have to check. You have to go do a promo and a confessional every day, which I think is great to get promo work. But before we were getting our promo work, it's like your promo work is you're telling stories with the boys and you're listening to Dusty Rhodes tell stories. And that kind of went away. You didn't see the coaches weren't as accessible. And so I feel like there were great things about FCW, great things about the Performance Center. And I have no idea what it's like now because I haven't been there in years and years.
During that time, you wrestled for that NXT as Travis Tyler. Never, as far as I can see, a main event star. But was that experience valuable to you at all?
It was really valuable to me. I wish that more people could have the trajectory that I had where I got to go in and learn the absolute best way to do your basics and got to build up such a foundation, such good fundamentals. And then I got to go out and create on my own and create my own matches and learn by falling on my face. I got to learn by going out there and having bad matches and not being worried that I was getting evaluated and that I could lose my job over it, because that is always looming especially when you're so young and so inexperienced and you're a contract wrestler. If you mess up, like I would have a bad practice, not even a bad practice. I might mess up one thing in practice or get corrected on one thing that happens in practice. And I spend the rest of the day like, oh, I might lose my job. So it was really nice after being in that high pressure environment and learning the fundamentals to go out and being able to create and kind of have the training wheels come off and realize, oh, if I fall off the bike, I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And going from Travis Tyler to Sammy Six Guns was like, it was such a jump, but it was such a jump. And Sammy Six Guns and Travis Tyler were completely opposite characters. Well, Travis Tyler wasn't a character. Travis Tyler was just a guy with a mullet that lost to the Ascension a lot. And Travis Tyler was referred to as a jobber to the stars. And I thought that was the best compliment someone could give Travis Tyler.
Hey, if you're going to get a compliment, it might as well be that, right? If there's no other option. It was July of 2014. WWE says farewell to Travis Tyler. And for the second time, if the first disappointment was setting up breaking down the ring and saying, get out of here, training, this would be number 2. But you're Sammy Six Guns now in Denver and a few other places. But at the time, you had to have your eyes back on the big time, getting back there somehow.
Yeah, it's as good as I felt. Like I would have conversations with people about, it feels really good to have the pressure be off. And immediately when I got released, I felt this weight leave me where I realized for 2 years I'd been afraid of losing the opportunity that I had. And I never really got the chance to enjoy it. And looking back now with hindsight, I never got the chance to really like give my all to it because I was always too scared to mess up. And so that weight leaving was like, oh, okay, like now I realize how wrestling should feel. And jumping to Sammy Six Guns was like, jumping to Sammy Six Guns and going back to Denver was it was just me having that weight come off. Like I feel like I went like really, really far the other direction with stuff. I was wearing like flamboyant stuff, and yeah, it was a good time.
Chris Goff in Kansas City, the promoter of Metro Pro Wrestling, gave you a call or a shout out in some form and informed you that in 2016 there was a multi-millionaire benefactor who was going to start a wrestling league, the National Wrestling League. We talked about it a lot on this show. And I guess they had their eyes on you at first. You were signing number 1, weren't you?
No, the Regal twins were signing number 1.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Number 2?
Well, number 3.
Number 3. Well,
It'd be number 3 behind the 2 twins. I don't know which one of them signed first.
maybe that's when I caught wind of you. But Chris Goff had his eye on you. Tell me about coming to the NWL.
I was working at a gym, and I had just been doing mostly shows in Denver and then going out to Vegas for Future Stars of Wrestling. And I got a Facebook message from Chris Goff while I was at work again. I always get these people that reach out about opportunities while I'm having a really bad day at a shoot job. And so I'm at the gym and I'm all pissed off, and I get a message from this guy. I thought his name was Chris Go because it's spelled Gough. And it says, "Hey Sam, I was wondering if you'd be interested in a full-time wrestling gig in Kansas City." And I responded, "Absolutely." And he was like, "Can you give me a call at this number?" And I remember instead of using my cell phone, I called him from my office phone for some reason.
Like he's going to know it's going to be very professional.
Yeah, I'm like, big shot over here on the office phone.
Yeah.
And he sounded like he expected me to be more apprehensive about it than I was, because he was kind of trying to like sell me on it. And I was sold as soon as it was like full-time pro wrestling gig. I'm like, yeah, whatever, anything, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And so they flew me out to Kansas City, and I was expecting just like kind of a version of Rocky Mountain Pro, which had been where I'd been doing a lot of wrestling and I'd been helping with training there, where it was like, they had their ring set up at a 24-hour gym, and we were kind of in the corner, and I was expecting it to be kind of similar to that. And we get there, and they have an entire floor of an office building rented out. And I come in, and they've got like the wall painted with the NWL logo. And this would have been November, I believe, of 2016. So this is 2 months before a show ever ran. And there were like people doing like marketing projects, and there are employees. It's like a buzzing office in this downtown Kansas City building. And I couldn't believe it. Like I took a selfie in front of the front desk. They had a front desk person.
Yeah.
I was blown away, and I was like, man, they have some serious money going into it. And I remember I sat in Chris's office, and he's like, we sit down, and he's kind of trying to sell me on it. I'm like, if you guys offer me a contract today, I will sign it. And he walked out of the office, came back in with a contract, and I signed. And from there, we started the discovery process of creating the new character, because they wanted to own everybody's characters. And I really thought I did a good job of taking the lessons that I learned from at NXT, where at NXT, I got, for example, I had 2 options for my name. You submit a list of 10 names. I really mailed it in. And the 2 options that were approved, so I just kind of chose random names, and I didn't put much thought into it. The 2 names that were approved were Julius Baer and Travis Tyler. Why would I ever choose Travis Tyler instead of Julius Baer? Like I just wanted to always lose on NXT TV, I guess.
It's a pretty generic sounding name.
Right? I don't know what I was thinking about. So I submitted a list of 10 names and I think 5 different character ideas that I would be over the moon about doing. And we had a talk with Major, and I think it was Major and Chris, and there was another guy, Travis Bowden, who's since passed on. But we had this talk, and it was kind of what kind of character we want, what the name's going to be, and then what we're going to do next. And so I'm pitching these different characters. One of them was like a Christian Grey type character, where it was like I was all about control, and I'm only happy when I'm controlling my opponents in my matches. And it got noticeably uncomfortable on the phone call. Like it just got quiet, and Major's like, "Oh, what else do you have?" and then I was like, "How about Dak Draper?" and told him about Dak Draper, and he's like, "Yeah, I love that."
And Dak Draper seems maybe just kind of the next evolution of Sammy Six Guns. I know online you, in other interviews, you described Dak Draper with a mix of different personalities and maybe just a little hint of a bratty child as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of like Sammy Six Guns grew up. Sammy Six Guns graduated from high school finally, and I would say I'm like a living tall tale. There's so many good things about me, it's hard to believe that I'm real. And I think that's really started to come across a lot recently too. That's what I'm really drilling on now, because I love stories. I love telling stories. I'm pretty long-winded, and that's what I am. I'm a story. And so, yeah, I'm a story, and like all my storytelling are from all my experiences in my life. And I was my mom has 6 siblings. She was the last one to have a kid, and I was her first kid. And so I was so spoiled because she loved me so much. And so part of who I am is a product of being spoiled a little bit. But look at me. If I was your child, you'd spoil me too.
That's Dak Draper. The NWL didn't help matters by giving you a glowing PR release. The press release headline said, NWL KC signs national superstar to multi-year contract. And the press release had, it put you over so well. It touted your undefeated MMA record, which is accurate. Was previously unaware. And you got the title straight away, the National Wrestling League Kansas City Championship in a 16-man tournament. And you carried the banner through December undefeated in singles competition. And these had to be just amazing times for you in Kansas City.
Oh, man. I look at it as a little bit of ignorance is bliss, but it was bliss. It was great. I felt like the king of Kansas City. My plan was like, I am putting the NWL on my back, and I'm making the NWL the most successful that it can be. And I just had I had rose-colored glasses on for all of it, pretty much until it closed. Mm-hmm. And but my time as the Kansas City champion and just learning a new audience, that was
they hated you.
Oh yeah.
Where did the shame on you come from?
Well, because everybody in Kansas City wants people to be nice to them, because Kansas City's a nice place. And there are other places in the world, like where I live right now, Baltimore, where people just idle on being mean to you. You know, they're just casually mean. And so I decided the people of Kansas City need to realize that they should be a little bit ashamed of themselves for expecting nice behavior out of people. And I believe the first time I said it was I taped 10 envelopes under front row seats at a show and announced that with the partnership that the NWL had with the Kansas City Chiefs, we were going to be giving out 10 tickets to that weekend's game at Arrowhead Stadium. And so people are getting their envelopes out, and they start opening up the envelopes, and it's just pieces of paper that say shame on you. Because shame on you, Kansas City. I've given you something better than free tickets to the game. I've given you a lesson that there are no free handouts in this world. Shame on you for expecting the free handout. And from there it was bananas. I was yelling shame on you at everyone.
Well, the fans came around eventually, because I think they hated a guy just a little bit more than you, and that was Jeremy Wyatt, who then was the next Kansas City champion. You guys had quite the feud that perhaps didn't see a conclusion because of the eventual closure of the company, but big things were on the horizon as the fans started to cheer for you. The NWL was opening a training and they did open a training and performance center, their version of the WWE PC, and later they were going to convert it into the NWL Arena and have shows there that consistently at the same venue for the live audience. Tell us about your time toward the end of the NWL and what it was like to be cheered by the fans in KC and around the state of Missouri and Kansas.
Well, oh man, first off, coming around and being cheered by the fans in Kansas City, that was really cool, because I remember the moment we had, it was the Team Jackson versus Team Major 5-on-5 elimination tag match for control of the company. And Team Major only had 4 guys. And when my music hit, hearing the reaction of the crowd, because I was really worried that they were either going to boo or they just weren't going to care that I was coming out to save the day. and hearing that reaction and seeing Ben Miller, he was working the sound, and seeing the look on his face like, oh my God. I was like, okay, cool. We are in business. And it still feels that way every time I walk out in Kansas City. I still feel that, like, that jolt, that energy from the Kansas City crowd. That was awesome. It felt so great. And then I think right after that was when I had like kind of the first sign of things not going great at NWL. I found out that they were going to be releasing people soon. I found out, I think the day before, that they were going to be releasing some people. And all I knew was that I was going to be okay. And so the next day I walk in and I'm just like, oh my God. And I like, you kind of see everybody and they're having a meeting and I'm just like.
Now, was this April of 2018 or is this earlier?
No, this was November.
November of 17.
And so, and I don't know who's getting released, but I know that like people are, like some of my friends are losing their jobs that day.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, oh, what's this meeting about? And I just see everybody like all bright-eyed and stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is not going to be a good meeting. And they pulled people, and I think they released like half of the full-time guys and I think half of the office workers too. And so that was like a sign of like, oh, things aren't going super great. But they got rid of the downtown office, and that's when they started work on the arena. So we were going to have the arena and the big arena show. And it kind of seemed like everything was almost getting more streamlined, where even the wrestlers at the company were doing more than just wrestling. Like we're pumping out so much content. Like I'd go in to film the Magnum Minute every week, and it went from being like a little like 1 minute YouTube video that I'd film at my apartment to like I would go in and they would have somebody with like a legit camera film it, and it was always about Guys Snacks because they were one of our sponsors. So don't forget the guys. And I don't know, I kind of felt like we were getting some momentum, and then we had the big arena show coming up, and they had these big drop downs of like Maverick, Jeremy Wyatt, Dak Draper.
Big banners, yeah.
Banners. They had these like sticky wraps on the wall. It was really cool. And then 2 days before the first big arena show was when they said we're going to have another meeting. And I remember the Regal twins text me that night, and they were like, I just feel uneasy about this meeting tomorrow. And I'm like, you don't have anything to worry about. Like, it's probably just a logistics meeting. And they were right, because we're sitting there and you can kind of see, I remember Michael Strider looked like he was really down, and Strider was always in a really good mood. And I was like, oh no, this isn't good. And I was sitting there eating yogurt. And I remember I'm eating this dumb big tub of yogurt, and Major walks in, tells us he's shutting it down. And my first thought was, well, I'm going to need to move. And I still don't know if I think it was a good decision. But my only reasoning for it was I had been so successful in moving from Denver to Kansas City that I was like, well, I just need to move again. Yeah. And things will work out great, which took me to Ring of Honor.
And you moved to Baltimore pretty soon after the NWL closed, right?
Yeah, I think NWL closed early April, and I was in Baltimore late July, maybe.
So you had
for a couple months.
Dead set on the ROH dojo.
No, I actually didn't even know the ROH dojo was there. So I decided to move. And
well, why did you go to Baltimore?
Because I talked with Chris Hero a bunch about what like my next step would be. And I had been going up to Minneapolis a lot to wrestle for Eric Cannon at First Wrestling. For a while after NWL closed, I kind of felt like he was one of the only people that was an advocate of mine in wrestling, that was like, that really wanted to book me a lot and use me well. And so I thought about moving up to Minneapolis, and I talked with Chris Hero about it. And he said he thought it'd be better if I pushed myself as far out of my comfort zone as possible. And we'd kind of talked about Baltimore geographically, how it's 3 hours from New York, but it's also close to the Carolinas. And if I move out there and just try and make connections and get a lot of bookings, I just wanted to be in front of a new audience. And it just seemed like a good location at the time. Also, I have some family that lives like 40 minutes north of Baltimore. So I kind of thought, well, if worst comes to worst, like it'll be nice to be near some family too. And then probably a week before I moved, I saw that the Ring of Honor dojo was moving to Baltimore. And so I reached out to the coach at the time, and he was like, oh yeah, we'd love to have you there. And so I was like, oh, okay, awesome. So I was just going to go there to make connections to get more indie bookings. And then they talked to me into starting to, some of the guys on the show were like, hey, just jump in and come to the ROH show and maybe you'll get a dark match. And I got a couple dark matches, and then a month or two later, I walked into training one day, and there was a guy there from the office, and he was like, "Yeah, from how you've done on dark matches, we want to offer you a contract." And so they offered me a contract, and it was their version of a developmental contract. It was a dojo contract, is what it was called. And so we had to come to training like 4 days a week, and then be at all the ROH shows, and we had to help with like ring setup and stuff like that. I feel like I've been like one of the developmental wrestlers of this decade. Like I've spent a lot of time in developmentals, and I've set up a lot of rings.
Yeah. We talked about name ownership. You took the Dak Draper name to Ring of Honor and also onto the Independents. When Major closed the NWL, did he give his blessing for everyone to take their names with them?
I don't know about everybody. I called him as soon as it closed, and I was like, "Hey, I like being Dak Draper. I don't really want to go back to being Sammy Six Guns. And so, is it all right if I use the name?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, totally." And
that's very great for talent to hear, and somewhat rare nowadays. You were in the Top Prospect Tournament, the last one to this day that has occurred because of the coronavirus and all that. But what was it like? Did you have to like fight to be in this position, to be in the Top Prospect Tournament?
No, I didn't.
Campaign?
It was more of a situation of I'm under this dojo contract, and I felt almost lost, where before, when I had been in NXT, I was so far from ever being on the main roster that when I would see guys get upset, the guys that were being featured on NXT TV, and they'd get upset and frustrated about not being on the main roster, I had never felt that, and I almost couldn't understand it because I'd never been through it before. And then being in the ROH dojo, where I'm coming to training for 3 or 4 days a week, going to all the shows to do ring setup, and then just sitting in the back watching the shows, I got it. Like you just feel like you're riding the bench. And so I was so happy when I got the text that asked me if I was free on these dates for the Top Prospect Tournament. I was like relieved. I was like, oh, thank God. Like finally something is happening. I don't know what's going to happen, but I was just thankful that there was something.
Yeah. And you ended up winning the tournament over Austin Gunn in the finals. So things are looking up for Dak Draper. And then Ring of Honor announces the reintroduction of the Pure Rules Wrestling, which I know you were a fan of, and you got to mix it up with Jonathan Gresham for the Pure Championship.
I did. Right before the pandemic, the last show that I had at Ring of Honor with fans was in St. Louis, I forget the arena, but was Gateway to Honor. I wrestled
Family
Dragon
Arena,
Lee.
St. Charles, yep.
I wrestled Dragon Lee for the TV championship and did not come up successful. But then right after that, the world shut down. We were out for like 6 months, and then came back with the Pure tournament. And man, I loved wrestling the Pure division because it allowed me to really use a lot of my amateur wrestling stuff. Because I think that there are times where people expect me to use more of my amateur wrestling because they don't realize that I grew up a pro wrestling fan. So when I got into pro wrestling, I was like, man, I want to be Razor Ramon. I didn't necessarily want to be, I didn't want to use Kurt Angle because he immersed very well, but I didn't want to be one of these guys where it's like, oh, well, I'm an amateur wrestler that pro wrestles. I didn't want to be that. And so it kind of allowed me, especially with more experience at this point too, to bring some of that amateur wrestling know-how that I had back into it. And just kind of working through those Pure matches and having to work within the rules really helped my game a lot. And it all culminated versus Jonathan Gresham, which to this day I think is the best match of my life. And there are some things that I do in that match that I'm more proud of athletically than anything that I did in amateur wrestling or in my football career or anything like that. Like the power bomb off the second rope. Like people don't realize Jonathan Gresham is covered in muscles. He is like an anvil. And then also in that same vein, when he had that choke on me and I walked all the way from the behind the ring around, got back into the ring to try and get the rope break. That was like the hardest thing I've ever done. Like I never would have imagined how hard that was. Yeah. And when I went out in the ring, it was like legitimately, like, my heart was beating so fast. I was just like, oh, thank God that I don't have to take another step with Jonathan Gresham on my back choking me.
Good times. It's glad that you had that to look forward to. While the pandemic was happening, we know that Ring of Honor basically ceased operations for 6 months, as you said, and then they came back and there were no fans in the audience, and they were taping all their shows for pay-per-view and syndication. Much like the NWL situation, though, was there ever any sign to you or the talent that you know of that things weren't going well for the company financially?
Not really, and at least not to me. But I think a lot of that's because we didn't have audiences to gauge off of. So with the no fan stuff, it's like we couldn't see if there was a small audience or anything like that. And no, I was surprised. But as soon as on the Zoom call that it happened, I knew what was happening, because I could just tell by the demeanor where they were like, yeah, we just want the contract guys to hang on for a second at the end of the call because we just don't want to talk about what's going on in the future or something like that. I could just tell. I was like, I have been through this enough times. We're going to lose our jobs. Mm-hmm. And I think I told Quinn that, my fiance, and sure enough, that's what happened. And I understand it. It's the nature of the beast. It's the third time that I've lost a full-time job in wrestling. I don't even know how many times that I've lost some sort of opportunity or something that I was really excited about. So that's just what happens in wrestling. Like, we're chasing a career in wrestling. That's what you run into sometimes.
For you and Quinn McKay, your fiance, as you mentioned, that had to be very tough news to hear that. But did you have any more shows to record for Ring of Honor after that, or was that it?
We had 2 more shows. We had a TV taping and then Final Battle. Mm-hmm. And I'd say the mood was pretty down. Just it's kind of one of those things where you're trying to have a party, but everybody knows it's a funeral a little bit. And I don't want to say a funeral because Ring of Honor is still running, but you just know a lot of the people that are there aren't going to be there again.
Right.
And like, for example, we were really good friends. I shouldn't say we were. We're really good friends with Brody King, and he's somebody that I would always look forward to seeing at shows. And we had like a lot of these inside jokes and stuff. And so I'd see stuff in between our tapings, or I'd think of something like, oh, I can't wait to tell Brody this. And it's like, I'm not gonna see Brody King at an ROH show again. Like, it was pretty obvious you're not gonna see Brody at an ROH show again. And just kind of some things like that really bummed you out a little bit, but you're trying to put your brave face on and do a good job. And then Final Battle was kind of a big send off, and Final Battle was a good time. I didn't have a match on Final Battle. I did commentary, but it was bittersweet. They didn't feel like all the other ROH shows had felt.
And Ring of Honor is a curious case right now because all of the contracted talent is released, and the company is coming back on April 1st in Dallas during WrestleMania weekend for Supercard of Honor. Are you going to be involved with that?
I have no idea. So many people are like, hey, great news, Ring of Honor's coming back. Like, you must be pumped. And I'm like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing. I don't expect to or anything like that. They're going to do what they're going to do. But it's something that me and at least everybody that I've talked to, we're all in the dark about. So I'm excited to see what they do. And I'm obviously glad that they're coming back. But I'm definitely very interested to see what happens and to see who's a part of it. And I know that Gresham versus Bandito is signed for the championship, so I'll obviously be very interested in that, with Gresham being a former opponent. And but yeah, I have no knowledge. I know as much as you do about that.
Yeah, that's what everyone's saying, so I tend to believe. What does the future hold for Dak Draper? Because you're still in Baltimore, right?
I'm still in Baltimore. I'll be in Baltimore at least until the summer. And right now I'm kind of in that weird limbo point of, do I move to somewhere that I've never been to before? Like I have always in the past in wrestling, when my life blows up, for lack of a better term. I feel like my life kind of will blow up and then I'll move somewhere else and find new success. Or do I move back to somewhere like Kansas City where I've had past success? I'm kind of in limbo right now, trying to decide, but I've got some months to do it. I'm wrestling on the East Coast. I'm wrestling a lot out here. I'm just trying to travel and wrestle and become the best wrestler I can be too, where if I get another opportunity somewhere, I want to be as ready as possible for it. So right now I'm not going around like, I'm not trying to bother the big companies and like, trying to do anything I can to get a tryout or to get in front of them right now. I want to be as good as I can possibly be before that happens. And so I'm just focusing on being the best Dak Draper that I can be.
Well, I see that around here in the Midwest, Kansas City, you're mixing it up with an old rival, Jeremy Wyatt, in the Dynamic Wrestling Federation, which by presentation and talent looks to be a spiritual successor to the NWL. Any future in Kansas City wrestling?
I have thought strongly about a return to Kansas City. Like, Kansas City is a front runner for the next place I'll end up. If we don't stay in Baltimore, Kansas City is number one on the list right now. And man, I'm so excited to wrestle Wyatt this weekend. Yeah, DWF is great. Watching my first match that I ever had with Wyatt, which was about 4 years ago, I was cringing just because I've gotten so much better since then. And so I'm really excited to see what we can put out in that match. But yeah, DWF, it's funny. Journey Pro seemed kind of like the successor to NWL, just with who was involved and the wrestlers. But Journey Pro is very different from what NWL was. They're the other Kansas City promotion.
Yeah.
Because I feel like NWL was a lot more family focused, and it was a show that you could bring kids of all ages to. And Journey's a lot more adult. There's cussing at the shows.
It's a 21 and up crowd.
Yeah, it's 21 and up. Like, I think they're almost always 21 and up there. And DWF, they have the same focus NWL had, where it's entertainment for your whole family. And so I think both shows are great. They both have something completely different to offer. Yeah. And I'm super excited about it. I'm glad to be involved with both companies. And I'm really glad to be wrestling in Kansas City a lot again.
Yeah. Hey, and we wouldn't mind seeing you a little bit more in St. Louis either. So
tell your local promoters, because I love being here too.
Hey, well, you're definitely one of the world's most durable wrestlers, given the strange and significant setbacks in your career. But that has really shaped you. You're a very determined person, always seeing what's coming next. And we can't wait to see it.
Hey, thanks a lot.
But before I let you go, Dak, I warned you that we were going to have a wrestling horror story on the show. You know, the baddest, the maddest, the saddest, from the ring or the road or the locker room. But I got to know what you have for us today.
Oh, well, this is actually one from the ring, the road, and the locker room.
Oh, lovely.
So after I didn't get signed by WWE after my first tryout, I started being trained by Pat Tanaka. And Pat was like, the best way for you to learn is by having a lot of matches. And the only place in the country where you can still work every night is Nashville. And so we got in a car and drove 20 hours from Nashville or from Colorado Springs to Nashville, Tennessee. And halfway through the trip, Pat starts calling people, promoters. And he's like, oh yeah, we got bookings lined up every night. And he's calling promoters, hey, we're coming out to Nashville this week. And I was like, oh God, we don't even have any bookings lined up. And then we get to St. Louis, actually. And Pat leaves his phone in a gas station bathroom. So his lifeline to all of these promoters, he left it in a gas station bathroom and didn't realize until we were an hour outside of St. Louis. Oh, no. So we had to turn back. Of course, his phone is gone. We get to the first show in Nashville, and he's like trying to get phone numbers of other promoters from these guys, but they all hate each other. All these promoters hate each other. So they're like being real cagey with the numbers.
They're all like the 20-mile rule, brother, you know.
It's ridiculous. And then it's like, well, where are we going to stay? It's like, oh, we're going to find a motel. We were getting paid like $20 to $30 a night. And so we're pooling our money to get a motel. The very first motel we get to, Pat goes in and we're in the car. And this is not like this is like the guy behind the counter owns the place. Like, this is not like a chain motel or a franchise. And the guy tells him, hey, these rooms are only for 2 people. I see 4 people in your car. And so Pat comes out and he tells us what the guy said. And we're like, yeah, we should just go to a different motel then. For some reason, Pat goes back in. And this is an old guy. And you can see he's pointing and he's yelling at the guy. And as he's opening the door to come outside, he's like, he yells through the door. He goes, I'll come through that window and beat up an old man. I'm like, oh my God. He gets in the car and he's like, drive. And so we have to go.
I love how it's the same result though.
Oh,
like
yeah.
you still have to leave.
Yeah, it was just like, let me go get in a verbal altercation with this old man real quick. We had another guy with us, the Polish Prince. So it was me and my buddy who I started training with, the superstar Andrew Titus. He actually stopped wrestling after this trip because of this trip. And then Pat and this guy, the Polish Prince, and the Polish Prince rented the car. And if we were in financial trouble, the Polish Prince would be kind of a financial lifeline. But Polish Prince was a manager. And he had this top hat that was in this giant square box that wouldn't fit in the trunk. And the box was just always kind of floating around in someone's way. And that was such a precursor for the trip. Because then we finally get a hotel room and we're in this cycle of we have to work on these shows that were not shows of high repute. They were, you're wrestling really bad, kind of dangerous guys in these like towns. We stayed in a town called Murfreesboro. And we're driving like an hour outside of Murfreesboro, and every night, and it's like to make like $30. And so we're like, how are we even gonna get gas money to get back? We were trapped. And we would go to Walmart and get the deli meals, and you'd eat the deli meals while you walk through Walmart because we didn't have money for food.
Oh my gosh.
And then put the box on the shelf and walk out. And we were just like stuck in this cycle. Third show, so third day we're there, Pat takes a hard buckle and breaks his ribs in the ring. Oh. So then we have like broken ribs, Pat, that were like carting around with us. We keep going. Day 5, me and Andrew, we're both young guys, young strapping gentlemen. We go get a disposable camera and get in our wrestling gear and go behind the hotel into a field. And I think there were 24 pictures on the disposable camera. I posed 12 different poses and he took 12 pictures of me. He posed 12 poses. I took 12 pictures of him. We're both in wrestling gear right now. So anyone who saw it had to look really ridiculous. Yeah. And then we sold those pictures for, I think, $3 each to get an extra. And I sold out of mine. So I got an extra $36. And we were doing the math and we're like, okay, we could leave. Like we could afford gas to leave. And we could afford gas to leave that night. No, it wouldn't have been that night because we were there for almost 2 weeks. So we kind of start to squirrel the money away. The night that broke the camel's back, we're wrestling these guys who wrestled in ghillie suits. They wrestled in masks and like it was like like hunting suits, like camouflage, like the movie Sniper, but like a Walmart version of it.
Oh, lovely.
And one of them starts kicking my partner in the head in the ring for real, and like really hard, and I get upset about it. In the fracas of me getting in the ring and the ref knowing that I'm coming in really, really pissed off, the other partner gets in to try and cool things down. I just see a guy wearing the exact same thing. I think it's the guy that was just kicking my partner's head in. So he comes in to try and cool things down. I punch him right square in the face.
Bam.
He falls down, tries to crawl out of the ring, tries to just go to the back. I'm way too athletic for him, so I cut him off at the pass. So he tries to run around the ring. I punch him again. He tries to roll through the ring. I catch him in the corner. So I'm beating up the wrong guy. And he's yelling the whole time that it's the wrong guy. But I thought it was some kind of weird Southern style like way of taunting you. Like, you got the wrong guy for this, as I'm kicking this guy's ass. The other partner, the guilty guy, just goes to the back. Pat doesn't see what happened. And we get to the back. And the guy who'd been kicking him in the head was like, I've been in this business for 20 years. And Pat doesn't even know what happened, but sees that there's like confrontation. He goes, 20 years of doing the same. He said a curse word, but 20 years of doing the same stuff. And starts getting in this guy's face. And like, so Pat's trying to fight this guy. Then he doesn't even know what happened. And the other guy's like, comes back. He's got a bloody nose. And like his mask just looks like it's like caked with blood. And I'm just like, oh, I felt so bad. And then we get in the car in our gear because we have a double shot that night. We have to go to another show. So I'm driving in my wrestling gear after this, and Pat's cussing up a storm. And we got to that show, and the promoter was like, it was some guy today. The promoter was like, hey, the house is late. I can't pay you guys tonight. So we didn't work and we left. And the next day we're like, hey, we gotta leave. Like we have enough money to get back, and only enough money to get back. And Pat goes, I'm staying. He's like, take the car. That's fine. It was a rental car. The guy, the Polish Prince, just rented for like a day and just kept. We just took it to Tennessee, and I guess they were calling him. I don't know, but he's like, you can take the car, but we're going to take a bus. We have some shows we're going to go to in Ohio. So Polish Prince and Pat got on a bus, and me and Andrew, we got in the car, we drove back, but it was like, we lived with like broken ribs Pat, who was like, it was like an injured bird that we're like carrying with us. And the thing is, we were getting the money we were getting paid. They're just taking money out of Pat's booking fee and giving it to us. Like, Pat was doing us a solid there. Like, he got us on the shows through that. So it was like, we weren't being taken advantage of or anything. It was just like, Pat was trying to get us more matches. And, but we had like injured Pat, the Polish Prince, and me and my buddy Andrew in this tiny hotel for like almost 2 weeks. And we're wrestling guys every night, getting in shoot fights. And, it'd be a good time if we had a little bit more money, I think. You know, like, you're a little bit happier when you don't have hunger pains. Like, we were just hungry and tired the whole time. But it was a trip that started with good intentions that through pure disorganization turned into an absolute disaster.
I love how at no point did Pat seemingly say, hey, you know what, guys, it's not really going our way. Maybe we'll throw in the towel on this one.
And we felt bad when we left because Pat's like, no, I'm going to keep going. Yeah. And it was like, oh, man. And I remember on the way back, it was so funny because we're driving to Colorado and it's just Andrew and I, and we drove 20 hours straight through, and we got to Kansas City and we realized we had done our math wrong, and we'd actually sold more of those little pictures because we started doing that disposable camera thing before every show because we were always selling the pictures, because not to be a jerk, but like everybody on the show was a little bit on the heftier side. So I feel like pictures of these like young tan guys were selling pretty well. So we had 60 extra bucks, and we were like, we could stop and get like a good dinner and like feel really good for the last 8 hours of the drive. But there's also that casino outside of Kansas City. What if we turn this money into more money? And I was like, oh, dude, I'm great at blackjack. Let's come in. I had never been in a casino before. I'd only played blackjack online. We go into this casino, and I look at the tables, and it says $20 minimum for blackjack. I didn't know that in a different part of the casino, there are lower minimum tables. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll get 3 hands. And if I can't make something happen in 3 hands, there's no way I can't do that. First hand bust. Second hand dealer gets blackjack. Second hand dealer gets arrives at 21, without it being blackjack. And I'm just like, the money was gone. We walked in and walked out in under 10 minutes. And Andrew hated me. It was such a quiet 8-hour drive from Kansas City to Colorado Springs, where it's like, we'd see a restaurant and be like, oh, we could have stopped at that Applebee's. We could have had beers too. Yeah. Huh. Interesting.
In and out in 10, man. Yeah, you don't waste any time.
You know?
How can the people follow Dak Draper and Cat Draper online?
You can follow me and my pets and see what we're all up to, Cat and Dog Draper. You can follow me at Mile High Magnum on both Twitter and Instagram, all one word. Don't worry about capitalization. It doesn't matter. And then on Facebook, I am at Dakota Draper, which is what my mother usually calls me. Dakota Draper is my Facebook page. I don't really update my Facebook page very often, so Twitter and Instagram are the way to go. I have some new merch drops. I'm going to start just selling my merch through my DMs, I believe, just with all the information getting stolen and stuff through certain sites. So I'll be posting my t-shirts that I have for sale, and you can DM me on Twitter to get a t-shirt. But yeah, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and check out St. Louis Anarchy and Dynamic Wrestling Federation, and follow their pages, subscribe to their pages on YouTube.
You can find me on social media, Twitter at @TheBenSimon, and the show is on Twitter at Grandel Wrestle. We're on Instagram at Grandel Wrestling. Today's show was produced, as always, by Joey O'Farrell. Our engineer is Key Henry. And if you'd like to do a podcast or a show yourself here at Midcoast Media, you can. Hit up the owner, Chris Denman, here at Midcoast Media. We thank them as always. Okay, so for the Grandel Wrestling Podcast, until next time, this is Ben Simon saying so long from the Show Me State.